gentlemen, we'll have to get these proceedings underway. Firstly, I'm Bob Cartwright, I'm the chairman tonight. My only input is to chair the meeting and to organise it. The purpose of this meeting is to receive a report from Matt Landos, who's here, and I'll deal with that in a moment. The structure will be reasonably simple. He's going to make a presentation of what he has found out in the last few months, years. At the end of it, that time, there will be a period of questions. We've only got one of these mics, so if anyone's got a question, we'll take you around and get the questions and have them answered. The purpose of Matt's, of what's happening here tonight, is Matt is basically pulling out to a large extent and passing this over to the community. And the purpose of this meeting is just to hear his report for the community, and then for the community to decide if and what they wish to do about this, if anything at all. Matt Landos is a Bachelor of Veterinary Science with First Class Honours. He's a member of the Australian College of Veterinary Science and Aquatic and Animal Health. He's an honorary lecturer and associate researcher at the University of Sydney in the Faculty of Vet Science in Aquatic and Animal Health, and he's the president of the Aquatic Animal Health chapter of Vet Scientists. Matt was the consulting veterinarian who first investigated the problems which were reported at Sunderland Fish Hatchery, which received widespread reporting in our local press. Since that time, he's spent approximately 30 hours a week for 2 years working on this case at a personal cost of approximately $150,000 in the government task force. He has not been paid, he has not received money, money is not involved in his study of this whatsoever. Everything he's done is off his own back. He's not been funded to undertake this work or for his contribution to the Minister Mulheron's Noosa Fish Health Investigation Task Force. He is a consultant to most of Australia's freshwater fish hatcheries and most aquatic sectors. I'll now pass you on to him, and I would request that we listen to him and then we will start questioning him later. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks very much for turning up today. I appreciate the chance to speak with you about what is essentially your river. It's not my river. I'm from Lennox Head in northern New South Wales, where we have a few problems in our own river, the Richmond River, which I need to continue working on also. I've spent around 2 years working on issues associated with this particular river. And I'd like to run you through today what I've found through my work, and to point out some of the things that are problematic in my view, and also to point out some solutions, things that the community may choose to do to improve the situation for the long term. So this all began with a phone call. So my veterinary practice operates like most other veterinary practices, except I work with fish rather than cats and dogs and cows. And I went to this particular fish hatchery, which is tucked away here. The hatchery building is right there, and there's a few little ponds that sit in this corner here. And what you'll notice is that the particular property is surrounded by a macadamia orchard in this instance. And what took place over several years has been a series of events that we've been looking at to try and determine exactly what's happened. We've seen mass mortality, so several ponds of fish all dying at exactly the same time. We've seen fish that are convulsing, so in full torsion, little larvae spinning around on the spot, whole tanks of fish spinning around in circles that have responded to antidotes for organophosphate poisoning. We've seen millions of deformed fish embryos, some of which have gained notoriety for their two-headedness, some of which had 3 tails, some of which had no eyes, some of which had spinal deformities. We've seen fish that simply didn't grow, that was stunted. So this is a whole collection of different conditions and different issues across several species of native fish. This particular hatchery breeds fish to restock back into the wild, put into dams for recreational fishermen. And the business has been severely harmed by the events that have taken place. These events, once I worked up the case initially, were notified through the formal channels to the Department, the Primary Industries and to the EPA, as well as to a group called the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority. They're the Commonwealth group who are responsible for regulation of agri-chemicals. They register the chemicals and write permits for chemicals on a national basis. There's also a role for the state government to regulate use after the point of sale. So there's two tiers to chemical regulation in Australia. So I was invited by Minister Tim Mulherron to join the task force, and it was a conditional invitation. The conditions of the invitation were it would take 12 months to reach its conclusion, that the final report would be tabled in Parliament, and that everything would be on the table. This was to be an open and transparent investigation based on science. There's a few things that haven't happened. The final report has never been released. The interim reports didn't report any of the data. I thank Johnny Burnett from the Australian Macadamia Farmers for coming up today, and he's in the audience. He, along with the macadamia farmers and the fish hatchery, have called for the release of this report from government. So all sides are calling for this report to be made public. It was a public inquiry, funded with public money and my money, and it hasn't been made public knowledge. There's been a freedom of information application lodged, it's been refused. There have also been several adverse event reports lodged with the Commonwealth regulator to say, raise a red flag, I think there could be a problem here with agri-chemicals and their impacts on fish. This is a formal process that veterinarians and doctors have to participate in. This is where the information, if you go and see your GP and they say, oh, there's a 1 in 10,000 chance you'll get a bad skin rash if I give you this pill, that information came from an adverse event report from someone who rang up and said, oh, my patient ate that pill and they got an awful rash. So I did due diligence and provided those adverse event reports to the regulator. They've responded to exactly none of them, and we're now 2 years and 1 month in. I got to the point of wondering, why am I doing this? Where is the care in this exercise? And it's been a slight uphill battle without a lot of assistance from the state government. There's been a number of different things that have been put out into the media, being put out as versions of the truth. I just want to present to you the facts of the matter as they've taken place for your own information. There was media that there was only one fish that had 2 heads. That's not true. There were hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands with hundreds of photographs, all of which were supplied to the department. There was the acting premier, Paul Lucas, made a public statement. He said it could just be genetics causing these 2-headed fish. Looking around the room, I don't see any problems with genetics here. And indeed, taking 2 wild fish from the river at random, breeding them together, we're pretty unlikely to get several 100,000 2-headed fish from 2 wild random fish. If that's not unlikely enough, what happened was that 4 pairs of fish were used, and all 4 pairs of fish in individual tanks all had massive deformity rates, around 90%. So this is now in the area which, if you got those kind of odds and you knew the answer was genetics, you'd be backing the Melbourne Cup winner without even thinking about it. So this is extremely unlikely. Myth 3 was that it could have been nutrition. So the suggestion was the larvae were malnourished and therefore they became deformed. Unfortunately, that was also wrong. The fish were deformed before they even ate. So before they started to need food, they were already deformed. So nutrition plays no role in those particular instances. There was a further one that it could have been water temperature. That's not true either. There were water heaters put in each tank, and each of those has a thermostat. The same water heaters were used for subsequent successful batches of bass that did not come from the Noosa River. There was no problem with the water temperature, there was no problem with the water heater, the water was fine. There was a perception that there were no chemicals found on the fish hatchery. That was also wrong. When the timing of sampling was used, which was correct, which was around the time at which they were being applied, there were indeed chemicals found in several of the water bodies on the fish hatchery, the exact chemicals which were in use at the same time on the neighbouring property. This is the mechanism by which agri-chemicals are applied to control pests on macadamia orchards. It's called a mist blaster or an atomizer. So it breaks the spray particles up into very small droplets, and this is a very effective way of getting good coverage of the leaf to get a high kill rate on the pest. My investigation suggests that this is highly likely to be one of the reasons with this material drifting that may have led to these events. So here's our bass, an embryo with 2 heads. Here's another one, and another one. So there's more than one. Here's a mullet, another species, with 3 tails. And that was a mullet that was taken from the Noosa River. So the links from the fish hatchery gave us an insight into issues that are likely to be taking place in the river. The bass were captured from the river and taken immediately to the hatchery and spawned within 48 hours of getting to the hatchery. Similarly with the mullet. They came straight out of the river, went up to the hatchery to be spawned. And the investigation points to the problem in those parent fish whilst they're recruited in the river. There's a range of evidence that corroborates these types of observations. I met with some of the commercial fishermen who have been working in this river for 40 years, and they use a fixed net, a fixed gill mesh net, and have been fishing that way for 40 years. During the course of the last 15 years, they've noticed a dramatic decline in bass, to the point where 15 years ago, they were actually frustrated by bass. They have to throw them back. They're not a fish they're able to keep legally. So they have to pull the bass out of their nets and release them. They're very spiky little fish. And so the fishermen got spiked and really didn't like them, and would have to move fishing spots to get away from the bass. Each year, the fishermen reported catching in excess of 1 tonne of bass in a single fishing shot. So a single line of net, they would get a tonne of bass several times a year, 15 years ago. In 2009, they caught 12 fish total for the year. So there's some dramatic changes happening in the waterway. The things that are hard for us to see because they're under the water. There's more evidence. There was a suggestion that the decline in bass could indeed be because of professional fishing, that they'd simply been fished out. The fishermen had caught them all. Now, the recreational anglers in this river are quite proactive in tagging fish when they catch them, measuring their body length, recording it on the database, and then measuring it again when they catch them again subsequently. And what they've found is that the average fish size in the Noosa River is getting bigger. Now that may seem like good news if you're an angler because the fish are getting bigger, but it's actually bad news. If the fishery was being overfished and they're all being caught in a 4-inch mesh, then all the big ones would be caught and the little ones would be left. If you overfish, the fish gets smaller, but the fish are actually getting bigger. What it means is there's no new juveniles coming into the fishery. So we've cut off reproduction of these animals. And there's other studies that have been done surveying the waterways for small fish, and they simply haven't found small bass. They're an absentee in the system. There's been some survey work through the course of the task force that was undertaken by the former EPA, now called DERM, and they measured a range of agri-chemicals and compounds in the Noosa River in various sampling points. They stated that they were all below the guideline level. So the way of interpreting these numbers for government and for regulation is to use what's called the ANZAC guidelines. And these are set up to try and give guidance to councils about whether there may be a problem in a particular catchment, or coming off a particular area they may need to address.